My story and others are very similar in the fact that we have shared something while doing time and getting out, witnessed their healing and their growth and their commitment to give back to our communities.
This is what they call the hilltop area. This is the early 90s when it was real bad. This is when I was abducted by the gangs.
Tacoma has always been very dangerous. Drugs, crime has been something that's devastated and ravaged this community.
What used to happen here when I was here, like people used to have guns in their lockers, like there used to be fights all over the place.
You know, my days of stealing cars and breaking into people's houses and all that type of stuff, it started when I was in middle school.
So for me, it was like trying to adapt and try to do the right things, but at the same time, having more negative energy and more negative people in my life than those that are positive. I probably went here for a couple months before I went to the institution.
And as a seventh grader, getting probation violations, they was giving them to me 30 days at a time. You know, a probation officer or a judge feeling that, you know, because I violated a curfew or because I missed an extra day of school because I was at home babysitting my brothers or sisters, that I determined that I needed more jail time.
I got sent up the first time for 2 years.
What did it mean to be able to right a wrong that you couldn't undo? To be able to understand that my pain impacted another family that much to where they lost somebody that they loved.
We've learned a lot about deterrence and when it works and when it doesn't. And it basically doesn't work very well unless people are 100% certain they're going to be caught, which is never really the case. And we also know from research that longer sentences don't deter more than shorter sentences. So there's not a deterrent rationale for throwing people in prison and throwing away the key. One of the most important characteristics of our approach to punishment in Washington state is our reliance on very long and life sentences. If you look at our prison population, over half are serving a sentence of 10 years or more, which is a very high proportion relative to other states.
But when the drugs came in and the breakdown of the community from that, then this area became very dangerous. This neighborhood, 98122, 98144, 98118, are the concentrated zip codes where the Black community was, and that seems to be disproportionately in our prison systems. This was a block, Cherry Street. You just couldn't walk through here. My brother would tell me he would walk with his friends, and his friends lived on Cherry, but they'd be afraid to go through because there'd be Crips over there. But this is my neighborhood. I'm not thinking about who's in the gang and who's not.
My interpretive lens to substance use and developing a problematic relationship with substances began very, very young, earlier than I would be able to comprehend. My father, his work was, easiest way to say it is he collected money for organized crime families. A lot of the environments and milieus that I ended up in were generally places where there was gambling, substance use, bars, compulsive behaviors, and so I just kind of had that modeled.
People who we encounter in the criminal justice system, sometimes they're coming from jail because one of the missions of Harborview is to care for folks who are incarcerated. A lot of patients who have addiction, and I'm an addiction medicine doctor as well as an internal medicine doctor. So I do primary care and addiction medicine. So we see a lot of patients who suffer from trauma, sometimes physical trauma, as well as trauma in their life and upbringing.
So there's this whole myth of monstrosity, right? That the people who do commit acts like that must be so terrible that they deserve to be locked up. And in reality, they were people, almost to a person, who experienced a lot of violence and trauma themselves and made a really poor decision.
You know, it wasn't a physical hands-on situation. When the event occurred, there was a door involved and a slamming of it. Ended up breaking a couple of her fingers. I kind of went about my day, and the next day law enforcement showed up and arrested me.
They bring mental health problems, psychosis or depression or anxiety. People will experience a lot of shame and guilt about their addiction because they're unable to focus on the things that build community.
Overnight, I lost my ability to have a place to stay with the DV, so I became a vehicle resident.
It can really end up with people not being connected to family, not being connected to work, not having a place to live.
And next thing you know, I get right up here on the grass and this two girls pulled a knife out on me. But I'm 14 and I found out later she also was a victim of addiction. I feel like from that day forward, I didn't feel safe walking in my own neighborhood. I'm still healing from the trauma of those times. I definitely was impacted by all the things that I was seeing that was around me because I'm in it. This is the trenches. This whole neighborhood, this is the trenches.
I ended up in prison in 1986. I was caught up in the whole drugs and everything, and ended up being arrested and charged with first-degree aggravated murder at the age of 18, and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
Prison is a traumatic place, and it's a traumatic experience to be confined and deprived of your relationships with your loved ones and all sorts of things. So yeah, there's a great deal of evidence that it is undermining people's physical and mental well-being while they're incarcerated, and that's another reason why it should be done as sparingly as possible. In Washington State, the average time served for homicide in this country through the 80s was about 13 years, and that struck people as normal and acceptable at that time.
I come to this work as a survivor of violent crime and as a person who has caused harm and gone through the legal system as a defendant. So when I was 19, 20 years old, I was in a domestic violence relationship when I was in college, and the police were called by a neighbor, which triggered the criminal legal system response. So I went through the justice system as a named victim of a crime, and very shortly after that, as a defendant facing a life sentence in federal court for something that I did in the course of surviving that violence.
4.5 years ago, I was at my rock bottom and in so much pain, and I just wanted the pain to go away. My dad got hooked on drugs very young and made a ton of poor decisions, and with mental health issues and generational curses mixed with a little bit of methamphetamine, prison sentence right there. And when my dad was in prison, every time he came out, he's just a little bit more broken. When he was shot, he dropped it immediately. He didn't suffer, he didn't have pain. And I know that Caleb is not the one that shot him. I know that Caleb was there. My father had multiple crimes on his record. I come from criminals and addicts, and I always knew my dad was going to not reach old age. I knew that since I was young because of the lifestyle that he lived.
In my case, I'm a victim of sexual assault as a child and actually as a teenager and also onto an adulthood. When I went through victim advocacy training through sexual assault, one of the number one questions that people have when they've been victimized is, why? Why me? Was it because of what I was wearing? Is it because my hair was blonde and long? Is it because my hair was up? Is it because I was drunk? Is it because of who I was? And the judge can't answer that. The prosecutor can't answer that. Your counselor can't answer that. Your neighbors can't answer that. The only person who can is the person who did that to you. And so if we completely separate the two, then we are robbing people from that answer. That's what causes turmoil. That's what causes hypervigilance, not feeling safe in their own skin, in their own home, and in their own community.
Kind of classic goal for punishment is retribution, which people think of as revenge, but actually doesn't mean that. It means the idea that if you've caused harm, you need to be accountable and experience some kind of suffering as a way of making amends. But actually, if you read the philosophers who wrote a lot about retribution, key to their thinking was the idea of proportionality. And so the idea was that whatever you suffer as a result of having caused harm should be proportional to the harm you caused, and that'd be why we punish somebody who took a life more than somebody who took some cookies. The issue there is that it's become understood as, so the more suffering the better, and sometimes people translate it as an eye for an eye, but we don't do that, right? We don't rape people who have committed rape. So the key issue there is what's proportional. And what's happened is we've ramped up our understanding of what proportional harm looks like over the last couple of decades.
I'm a daughter of the Central District. This is the historical Black community of Seattle, Washington. So I was privileged to live in this community when it was just Black folks, homeowners, business owners. There was a lot of beauty in the community, and it still is. My children and I have family here still in the Central District, even though it's been gentrified. The context that really pushed me forward in my advocacy was the war on drugs, or I say the war on the Black community, because it was like a bomb that fell right into the community. And we didn't understand addiction. We didn't bring it here or what have you, but what I watched in real time was the effects on my family who were victim of addiction, the impact on the families who had to take care of the kids, take care of the community, our neighbors, and make sure people weren't homeless, fed, whatever we could do to hold up. At the same time, being in a community that's being restricted systemically from home loans, being redlined here, lack of resources, watching the healthcare system not serve us but want to criminalize folks of addiction. I'm here to just show some history and also to honor and let people know they ain't thrown away. I ain't forgot, you know?
My name is Charles Schulke. I was at Cullen Bay Correction Center in Washington State for about 10 years. Originally, when I first got there, it still didn't seem real, and I was still caught up in that lifestyle of running and gunning. And I'm going into prison thinking I'm gonna just be a better convict when I get out. And now all of a sudden, I'm realizing that there's a possibility of a real life.
Eventually made my way to Cullen Bay, where I spent the last 17 years of my 37-year incarceration. Kamani Carter, Willie Nobles, and a few others designed a program called TEACH.
Folks who have criminal justice involvement uh, often bring also the most inspiring stories of recovery. And we in our programs do have peer support specialists, people who have lived experience of addiction, and often the criminal justice system as well. And what they bring to our program, it really can't be described in words. It's just such a different thing than what I can do as a physician in a room with a patient. And being able to connect with people who have had a similar lived experience can be the difference between feeling like the medical encounter is barely adequate, turn that into something that is really meaningful and can become a platform for their recovery.
And so as I continued on that path, you know what I mean, I continued to realize that there was a whole bunch of other people in the joint that also was looking for better ways of improving themselves. You know what I mean? And all I did was just giving them the tools that I was already using. It's like, listen, you know what I mean? This is how you begin to work on yourself.
So we understood that education was very important because we've seen it change the whole environment. This went from someone getting stabbed or someone getting beat up every day to no violence on the compound. Now we have the TEACH program at 3 prisons.
There is a lot of evidence that shows that access to higher education in prison is one of the most effective programming interventions that we know of in terms of reducing repeat offending.
And prison is a very segregated place. So each group, whether it was the whites or the blacks or the Mexicans or the natives, these guys were the coolest guys in the whole prison, the guys everybody looked up to, that were all going to school. And it was amazing because the trickle-down effect, then school became cool. This prison, school was cool.
It was an amazing program. It allowed us to get a further education, to grow. Teaching guys education, showing them that they were cared about, and giving them a sense of worth to learn, to grow, was such a dynamic shift that there was one day when we came out onto the tier and we looked down in the day room, and there was tables which were normally segregated tables, but at this time of the day there was people from every nationality, ethnic origin, everything, just sitting there at the table learning. I try to tell people I wish you could bottle that and put it in something, because it's the epitome of what education can really do and change.
I was interested in engineering, so I came to Tacoma Community College. I got in touch with a Department of Corrections navigator who worked here at Tacoma Community College, and he brought me in, cut all the red tape. Within a week, he had me signed up for classes, and I started fall quarter. Since then, I have now been accepted to the University of Washington for material science engineering. I've gotten a ton of scholarships. I was honored with Student of the Year by the president of the school and asked to give the commencement speech. And every bit of it is because I had this taste of success in education when I was in prison. I had a chance. It's a little upsetting, to say that 10 years of incarceration was the best thing that could have happened to me, but it does seem like it is.
There was a little Southside kid that was their hitman. He was the dude that they sent out whenever somebody needed to be beat up. He was the one that went and did it. We got him into going to school, and he was waiting to do his final for his English 101, because he had to have it as a prerequisite to get his AA degree. And all of a sudden they came to him and said, "Hey, we need you to go handle that." And he said, "No, I'm not doing that." He said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I got a final coming up, man. You can wait until my final's done." There's no way, man. I've worked way too hard to get here. Nuh-uh.
So now I'm giving back in the positive way. I'm helping youth and I'm helping the kids. That's another part of my healing process. Being able to change my life inside is what's making me help better out here. Getting to them when they're young and making sure that they don't have to go through those hurt pains where they can feel like they got to hurt others.
What's required of someone to actively engage in an accountability process is significantly more rigorous than what's required of somebody to be punished, right? And while the punishment is painful, it doesn't require any action or follow through on behalf of the person who has caused harm. What we ask of someone in an accountability process is to show up for potentially facing the worst thing that they've ever done and to face it head on.
I actually was introduced to a man who got out of prison for molesting children. I heard about his story, and I ended up sharing him mine and the healing that I went through of what happened to me as a kid. And I got to ask him questions like, why? Why does your brain, why did you want to do this? And I got to see a grown man break down. And for the first time, I actually felt the most comfortable I'd ever been.
They want the opportunity to ask the person, why did you do that? Why me? They want to hear that person express regret and remorse. They want that person to take responsibility. And above all else, they want to believe that that person will not harm more people in the future. And very few of those things are accomplished by incarceration.
It is asking that you do an enormous amount of internal work and work with your community.
I know from the gate, he was always really like remorseful about the impact and the crime. And when I knew that he wrote that letter to your family, to you, I was like shocked that you were willing to have like a real genuine like relationship with him.
I ended up coming to some conclusions that I never would have ever had if I didn't talk to someone who society would deem as a monster.
It might mean that 25 years later, they're looking at and talking about and saying out loud for the first time in their entire lives the harm that they caused. And that they are being asked to truth tell in a way that the court system does not ask.
Like your guys' process of like healing, accountability, and like I think the last one, like love, like the true love that you both like feel for one another. Like I never thought about like organizations that are doing this type of work, like thinking about healing, thinking about like really restoring communities, restoring people.
People want to know that no one else is going to have to experience what they've experienced. And that means getting to be involved in, creating a plan to ensure that it won't happen again.
No amount of counseling, no amount of alcohol, no amount of anything could have got me to that conclusion. And it was only because I talked to a man who was convicted of a similar crime against children.
They want to know why what happened has happened. And they also want to know often how. People want to know things like, what were the last words of my loved one?
That's all I want to do. I want to help others not hurt anymore. And if telling my story helps, fine, I'll tell it over and over and over again. If it brings more parents home, like, yes, please listen to me. I'll talk every day for the rest of my life if my story can change somebody else's story.
I got two perfectly good hands, legs. I'm of sound mind. You know what I mean? And I just realized is that I didn't give myself a fucking chance. And I threw my life away and I was stuck in the fucking hole with a whole bunch of banging ass, complaining ass motherfuckers. You know what I mean? And I did it to myself. That was the thing that I could not get around, no matter how much I looked at it, is that I did it to myself. You know, I kind of went through a range of emotions, you know what I mean? Not just anger, but like shame. You know, taking the life of Corey Pittman was something that I was never gonna ever get past in my life, no matter how many breaths I took, because it was an action that I committed.
Restorative justice is a broad term, and it can encompass a lot of different ways of doing and thinking about justice, but at the heart of it is the idea that instead of asking who broke a law and how should we punish them, we should ask a series of questions about what harm was caused and what the person who's been harmed needs to heal.
You know, since meeting you, you really inspired me as a single woman. You blow me away. I really have so much hope in rebuilding my life again at 40. Is really hard and scary, especially when I've never been alone, and seeing you do it makes me believe that I can do it too, and I can have the kind of life that I want. And I'm so thankful for you.
Like how important it is to like have people that like really support you. I'm so glad he reached out to you. And I really know now like what family like really is, like, who's there for you, who doesn't judge you, and who's gonna be there for you, like even when things don't look ideal. And you're like hella fucking love you.
I really do. I appreciate you so much.
I just let everybody know that we are the one-stop shop with the smile on the block. All right, and so I just say welcome.
Come on.
Okay, boom.
Bam.
I'll get the 24-ounce Cool Breeze. The systemic pieces that played a role in them being there, that there are community folks, there are organizations like Family Shoulder to Shoulder, and people just in their hearts are saying, we have not forgotten about you.